It's May 1995. John C. Andrews proceeds haltingly through the series of doors and gates designed to prevent prisoners, like himself, from escaping the musty confines of the Wisconsin penitentiary system. As guards bring the final barrier to a squeaking close behind him, and John steps through the concrete walls and brick facade into the haze of early summer daylight, he enters a world that hasn't changed much since he left it 14 months ago. Since the conclusion of his trial in the murder of Starkey Swenson back in March 1994, a trial that John ended before the jury could deliberate his guilt or innocence by pleading to a lesser charge, a few major events have occurred. O.J. Simpson allegedly murdered Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. The United States began hosting the Men's Soccer World Cup. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols set off a bomb in Oklahoma City, and the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, struck his final victim, a lobbyist from California. On the day John Andrews leaves prison, This Is How We Do It by Montel Jordan is the #1 song in the country, and the sitcom Friends is beginning to hit its stride. But all in all, John Andrews exits the prison and enters a society he knows, a world that hasn't moved on too far without him. He's even managed to retain a sense of his innocence, as the Alford plea John entered in his trial allowed him to continue to deny any involvement in Starkey Swenson's disappearance, while acknowledging there was a risk a jury might vote to convict, one that his plea would help him avoid. Since he maintains his innocence in the matter, John has never spoken with investigators about details of the accused murder. He's never given information on where Starkey Swenson's body might be found, and the police have no leads on a search area to even begin efforts to recover his remains. And that's how things stand for over 25 years. John Andrews has served time for the killing of Starkey Swenson, albeit while claiming his innocence, and the investigation is over. Starkey's body will likely never be found. And then, suddenly, we hear from Gene. I'm Matt Hiskis, co-host of Cold Case Frozen Tundra. This is episode 5, Something Strange in Omro.
Hello and welcome back to the Cold Case Frozen Tundra podcast. I'm Dr. Jordan Karsten, Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and your co-host in this investigation into the missing body of Starkey Swenson. If you've been following the story throughout this series, you know that Starkey Swenson was last seen leaving his home on bicycle on the night of August 13, 1983 in Neenah, Wisconsin. His case was a missing persons investigation for over a decade before new witnesses stepped forward with information that led to the arrest and trial of John C. Andrews, who was charged with Starkey's murder. Following Andrews' trial, plea bargain, and prison sentence, nothing more really happens in the case. It's no longer an open investigation. The fact that Starkey Swenson's body has never been recovered is, without a doubt, a sore spot for the police. They love to close that final chapter of the investigation and bring that last sense of closure to Starkey's family. But it's not something they can devote detectives' time towards solving. So Starkey's body stays missing.
Recently, nearly 40 years since Starkey Swenson went missing, and decades since any new information has been provided in the case, something happens. Police receive a call from Jean. We're keeping her last name off the record out of respect for her privacy, who sheds new light on a possible location for Starkey's remains.
Yeah, that's right. Jean's in her later middle-aged years now. She was in her teens at the time of Starkey's disappearance. For many years, Jean knew that her aunt was involved in some capacity with John Andrews. They were quite close. He would be invited to family events, sat with the family at her uncle's funeral, and even was listed among surviving relatives in her cousin's obituary. But it wasn't until Jean obtained farmland passed through her family over the years that she learned details which led her to contact the police.
So she hears these new details about John Andrews, thinks they could be relevant to the Starkey Swenson case, and she calls the police. And that's when the police contact you, correct?
Yeah, it was shortly after that. At this point, it's been decades since Starkey went missing, and all that would typically be left of his body, if found, would be Starkey Swenson's skeletal remains. That's typically outside the area of expertise for police investigators. Just as they would call in a pathologist if they found a recently deceased body, one that has some soft tissue remaining, that is. They call me as an anthropologist if they need to find and identify a skeleton, or even individual bones. So I've been brought in to use the information that Jean can provide. With my team as scientific search experts and anthropology students, I hope to help find, identify, and excavate the body of Starkey Swenson.
We are about to get into our conversation with Jean, where we will learn about her family, her relatives' histories with John Andrews, and the details she learned which she believes may aid in the search for Starkey Swenson's body. But I want to bring up one important point first. Jean's land, the farm previously owned by her aunt who was involved with John, is located in a small rural town surrounded by miles of farmland, about 25 minutes southwest of Neenah, where Starkey Swenson was last seen. To get there, John Andrews would have needed to leave the home of Claire on the night of the murder and head in the exact opposite direction of his apartment in Appleton, Wisconsin. He'd have needed to travel through this small town as well as the many others which dot the Wisconsin countryside along that route without raising any suspicion. And he'd have to do so after he'd been drinking all day, per Claire Andrews' testimony in court. Normally, it would seem unlikely that John made this drive on that night, with or without a body. But we know that's exactly what John did. Jean's land is located in Omro, Wisconsin, the same small town John Andrews gave to investigators as his alibi for the night of Starkey Swenson's disappearance. John told police he went to the Drop Zone bar after leaving Claire's home on August 13, 1983. Jean's land is about 10 minutes down that road.
Hello.
Hi, Jean. Jordan Karsten calling you.
Oh, hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I have to find someplace quiet. I have a dog that I was hoping I'd have her next to me so I could quiet her down, but unfortunately not. So
I understand that. I've got a 90-pound golden doodle who thinks that he's a human, so I'm used to doing the same kind of stuff. We apologize for the audio quality. Jean's land is deep enough in the Wisconsin countryside that consistent internet service is a challenge. So we're recording our phone call on speakerphone. So I've got with me here Matt Hiskis, who's helping me record this podcast. Hi, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just...
Oh, I'm good.
So we're just, I guess I'll tell you I did a little bit yesterday, but I'll tell you just a little bit about what we've got so far. So far using all old newspaper clippings, information from Winnebago County Sheriff, we've put together a history of the case from the day that Starkey Swenson goes missing, all the way up to the conviction of John Andrews. And so...
That is fascinating.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating story, really when it comes down to it. A lot of people, a lot of connections. And so pretty interesting, especially having gone out and searched the property. So if you could, what would be great for us is if you could just tell us what you believe to be the connection of your property in the Omro, Wisconsin area to the Starkey Swenson case.
Okay. My uncle worked with John Andrews, and my uncle developed cancer, and it was lung cancer, and it was terminal. When my uncle went home for his final days, John Andrews started coming around. And my mother, who we have the house that you saw, my mother was going over and helping my Uncle Rex's wife care for him. And, my uncle had said to my mom, he said, "Why is he here? I don't want him here." So my mom knew that, everybody assumed that Andrews had killed Mr. Swenson. And so she was uncomfortable with him being around there anyway, but my uncle was as well. Mr. Andrews, he became fast friends with my Aunt Dorothy and their daughter Mary, who lived at that house as well. And, even like after my uncle had passed away, at the funeral, John Andrews was sitting with my aunt and her daughter. And, my mom thought that was so odd, because he wasn't family, but he had definitely inserted himself into their lives. So that was kind of an awkward situation for her and for us as well.